You can, I guess you could use it if you're not really.
I didn't ask how many went to this council.
Cheaper, you put that?
Paid for ours too.
Good evening, everyone. So it's just after 5 o'clock on Monday, February 4th. Welcome everybody to the committee meeting. I'll call things to order, and we can move all the way down the list to adopt the agenda. Everybody's fine with that, I would assume. Any adjustments there? If not, Councillor Oakestra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. So we'll move down to some unfinished business that we have from our Community Services Department regarding the Lacombe Athletic Park expansion. Director Juke, would you care to take us through this item, please?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and Council. The report today is in front of you to Thank you, Mayor Creasy and Council. The report in front of you today is to provide an outline of the financial supports that may be requested from the Lacombe Athletic Park Association for their planned 2019-2020 expansion of the MEG Global Athletic Park. This information is presented for discussion only. Just for some background, for those that are not familiar with the issue, the Lacombe Athletic Park Association actually developed the current amenities at MEG Global Athletic Park. At their October 22nd, 2018 meeting, Council resolved to support in principle the expansion project and directed administration to work with the association to develop a business plan. In November, just following that, the association announced a major donation of 50% of the projected project costs from MEG Global in the amount of $2 million. And part of this has, I believe, already been received. I think it's 25% of it, or $500,000. Lacombe County Council has also received presentations from Lacombe Athletic Park Association and has passed a motion, in fact two, similar to the city's support in principle. And also the Lacombe District Recreation Parks and Culture Board met on January 29th and reviewed the project and recommended that Council support the expansion. So just as a way to analyze the project in context with city goals and plans, the city's Recreation and Culture Master Plan identifies a running track as a high priority infrastructure item for the community. Additionally, the same plan recommends promoting partnerships with community groups to optimize the use of public funding with obviously donation and volunteer activities. And the project also is supported by a number of the project supports a number of strategic and business plan goals. They're itemized a little bit later in this report. The Lacombe Athletic Park is well used by local groups as well as a number of groups out of nearby cities and elsewhere in Alberta. And there's a list there that just itemizes a number of them. That's actually taken from the presentation that the association gave us in October. So the issue really in front of us today is the financial implications of this project on city's financing sources. So there's going to be a budget requirement, and there's also going to be ongoing operational funding required for the expanded park. I'll just go through the capital first, and then I'll talk about the operating. So as with previous association projects, 4 capital funding sources will be called upon to compile the $4 million needed for the expansion. These are cash donations from fundraising, in-kind donations from contractors associated with the project, federal and provincial grant programs, and municipal support through city and county grants or donations and in-kind contributions. And I just want to mention at this point that in the past, another way to convey municipal support has been through loans from the municipality to the association. So MEG Global has obviously committed $2 million, or half the costs already for this project. And the association is planning their annual gala fundraiser to take place on March 2nd. And I believe that usually yields about $65,000. I'm not sure of that amount, but it's a significant fundraising effort that they make there. The association is preparing applications for 2 separate external government grants. One is a federal grant and the other one is a provincial one. The federal one is Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, and the provincial one is the Community Facility Enhancement Program, or CFEP. ISIP receives and approves applications on an ongoing basis and could cost share up to 40% of the total project costs, or in this case $1.6 million. And it's hoped that an application would receive a response by September of 2019. The deadline for CFEP grant applications of this magnitude is October 1st, 2019, and the association will request $1 million, but the funding level will not be known prior to the projected start date for phase 1, because they won't get their decision probably until early 2020. But the association has a successful track record of obtaining in-kind contributions from project contractors to reduce costs, and the financial impact of that source of funding will not be known until the project is well underway. City capital funding support could be in the form of a cash donation via debenture we could borrow, and or in part from use of the city's Community Builder Partnership Fund, which currently today is showing a balance of $156,350 available. I just want to mention that this is also a potential source of funding that was identified with the Performing Arts Group as well. And there are also other applications to that fund, and those aren't known this time. In the past, the city has also contributed in-kind work to deliver on its funding commitment. And I should just elaborate a little bit about the loan. In the past, in the 2011 initial project to develop the park, the city funded the association by giving them a loan from our general capital reserve and of $250,000. And then with a small amount of interest, the association did pay that back over the course of, it was set out to pay back in 9 years, and they paid $30,000 a year every year until it was paid off, and it was paid off early. But that particular source of funding or that particular arrangement has not been discussed with the association at this time for this project. So just looking at the capital cost funding sources, we see in the table 1, we see MEG global sponsorship there. We see other in-kind and fundraising, which is unknown at this time. We have some speculation there for external government grants, for example, the ISIP grant or the CFEP grant, or some amount from each. The next 3 columns. Potential county contribution is itemized here as well, depending again on the shortfall between the external government grants and the MEG global sponsorship. The county contribution, the potential is shown at 1/3 of the shortfall, and the city contribution is shown as 2/3 of the shortfall. So again, following the same column layout, we've got potential demands on the city for financing or support with a capital contribution of $1.4 million. Debt servicing will be somewhere in the area of $117,000 a year. There will be an increased insurance cost. The city pays this for the Lacombe Athletic Park Association every year, so it's expected to double. There will be an increase to the city operating grant because the ongoing operations of the park will cost more. And that's estimated there as well. Currently, the city pays about 25% of the operating costs of the park every year. So the total increase in that first column would be $151,416 a year, which translates into a 1.07% tax impact on ratepayers. So each of the columns has the same sort of analysis, or I guess calculations of the impact, and you'll see that the tax impact by percent vary from 0.2 all the way up to 1.07. And that will depend primarily on the success of the grant applications. Project timelines, the more detailed business plan is going to be presented by the Lacombe Athletic Park Association on February 11th. We've received it, I haven't reviewed it yet, but we have received it. It may outline projections of capital funding cash flow requirements, for example, how much they need when. Their business case for increased revenue and post-project operational cost increases. We have got an estimate, but I'm not sure how much better that will be calculated in their business plan. We'll find out. Phase 1 is expected to commence in September of 2019. Best case scenario, that's earliest, and will encompass upgrades to the field house, bathrooms, and change rooms. So that's the actual building. Phase 2, scheduled for 2020, includes installation of the international track and supporting field infrastructure as well. And one thing that's not mentioned here is that the lease with, the city's lease with the Wolf Creek School Division is being renegotiated right now because there is additional land that's going to be required for this project. And as soon as that's completed, the city will then renegotiate its sublease with Lacombe Athletic Park Association. It's looking good. There doesn't seem to be difficulties in the way of that, except for a couple of outstanding contract or lease terms that have been a problem we may address at the same time. Legislative authority is covered by the MGA, no problem. Service level impact. The project will result in a significantly increased level of service to ratepayers in the parks and recreation functional area. It'll be field and track infrastructure, improved user amenities, and a larger spectator capacity. Would the council like me to read the strategic plan references? There's 6, 7 ways that this project does support strategic plan goals. And then at the end, there's just a quote from the council resolution to support park expansion in principle. So I'll be happy to answer questions if you have any.
Councillor Ross, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess I would like a more clear definition, either from CEO administration as principle and support. Like we've obviously had other groups and organizations present to the council of their passions and of the success of their directions, and I think we've given direction to several organizations as to proceed with their grant applications. And I just want to clear that I'm hoping that we're not giving the perception or message that the city's Plan B if Plan A don't work with all grant applications. I guess I'm to say we've had some other groups also, and yet to give a final answer, to have a good perception to our citizens as being fiscally responsible, and yet we don't know, there's no guarantee what we're getting for. So how do we, it seems like we're kind of in the middle, and from I guess the last obviously 16 months in council is when some experiences where you feel left in a corner, and I don't appreciate that feeling. I guess you want more concrete numbers and then more understood direction from where we're at for making decisions until, because I feel these user groups want to proceed with their interests, and yet the end result of what it's going to cost us is going to be kind of like the cart before the horse, whatever that saying is. So I guess that's when we say, when the state gives the direction, or when from a presentation we support you in principle, that's a very uncomfortable position. That's how I feel about it. That's all.
Chief Cuddy?
So I think that's a fair comment, and we knew that when you were asked to present, to provide support in principle, that you would want to have the information as soon as possible, so you knew what that range looked like, what does it actually mean. That's sort of our hope tonight. We are hoping that the business plan will clear up some of that detail. What you have before you is based on quite a bit of assumptions on our part. One of the things we do think it's conservative. We've amortized the full project over, no matter what your contribution is, over 15 years. And really there are components of this project that you could amortize over 25 years to lower that annual impact. At the top end, where you're seeing a potential capital contribution of the city at 1.4, that would be about 3% of your entire debt limit, debt capacity defined by the Municipal Government Act. At the bottom end of requirement, well, I suppose there's this bottom end of 0, but I don't think that's probably likely to happen. At the bottom end of 266, 667, that's about 0.4% of your debt limit. So there's quite a bit of variability there, and I guess that's what we wanted to bring to council's attention, is that depending on where those grant applications go, you could be seeing anywhere from sort of like a 0.5% to a 1% tax impact associated with this project. And your taxation policy actually specifies that new service levels, which a running track would be considered a new service level, a new infrastructure for a new activity, you should be looking for either additional revenue or a specific component of the tax increase, I guess, identified for that project, because really new service levels need to be, it's new funding. It's very, very difficult to fit new services into an existing budget, especially if you're trying to stay within inflation.
Councillor Jacobson.
Sure, I apologize if you mentioned this, Director Jew. Oh, sorry. Do we have any sort of indication, historically or otherwise, of what the potential success of these grant applications is going to be?
Unfortunately, no, there's no way to know. We do know only that any expenditures made on the project before the grants are decided will be ineligible to be used to calculate the total project costs. So it can be started before the grant's decided, but anything that's expended prior to the grant decision is not going to be something that they'll calculate their percentage support on.
So we should hold off costs as long as possible?
Well, half the funding is in place for the project.
Maybe just a sharpening of that question. Does this project fall well within the scope of these grants? Is it like it would seem to be right in the wheelhouse, so to speak, or would this project be more on the periphery of the scope of these grants?
So it is well within the scope of these grants. Like, it is a right down the chute in terms of the scope. But the $1 million for the CFAP would be the biggest approval that I'm aware of for a project of this nature. So I would say you will likely get, nothing's guaranteed, but you will likely get some approval for a portion of these, but say like 50% of what they're eligible for, maybe, somewhere in there.
And then, hold back, I forgot what I was going to say.
Not a problem. You can think about it for a second. There was some reference made to our support, and just to be clear, we have not given additional financial support as yet. This is just for information. There was never a promise of direct financial support for the capital costs. I think that we all recall from the presentation that was given to us is that after the group came and presented to us that in fact they really did not even have any specific number, and made it very clear to us that the project was going ahead regardless of municipal involvement. So I think that we need to keep that in mind, and I couldn't help but chuckle when you said the cart before the horse, and I think this is a very good example of that, because there are a lot of unknowns and this is a great deal of money. I did have a couple of questions regarding some of the operational numbers that we provide. So in that second graph on the bottom, the increase to the city operating grant of $26,000 per year, so that represents 25% of the overall increase in, as this is just the city operating grant, is that correct?
That's correct.
So then basically the supposed increase is the 26 plus the 7,700, so $34,000
Give or take, yes.
multiplied times 4. So
The-
68, $136,000 a year is the expected additional operating cost of this facility?
Not exactly. So the city pays the insurance
Outright.
outright. We
Okay.
pay the whole premium. In fact, that's only the increase shown there.
Okay,
Currently, the city pays about 25% of the park operating costs per
Right.
year.
so then it's the 26,000 times 4, so 105,000.
That's correct.
Plus the 7,700, so 113,000
Increase.
less a hair increase in operating costs to the facility. I mean, I appreciate projections being done on this type of thing, but I find that to be excessive, quite unreasonable, actually. I mean, this is to add on 2 large dressing rooms and some bathrooms, and this,
Yes, and the international running track. And some field infrastructure as well, such as a shot put area and another.
right, but I mean, the ongoing operating costs for a shot put field, I mean, we're not, it's mostly the building and the track. I just find them excessive, but that's all. I don't know if anybody agrees with me or not, doesn't, I was kind of shocked that that's the increase. Chief Covey?
So we did have, excuse me, we did have to make some assumptions there, but when we met with them, they had mentioned an additional $80,000 for capital replacement that they would be associating with the track and those additional buildings. So that would be of the 100 and some that you identified. I think the majority of it is for capital replacement. But I do want to caution that when we looked at just continuing the 25% city costs, that is an assumption that I'm not sure we have a lot of confidence in, because that's their current operating sort of mechanism that say, I'm not sure what their budget is total, do you know off the top of your?
Not off the top of my head, no.
But the city pays a portion of about 20%, I believe. And so we said, okay, going forward, can they have the same cost recovery off of a track as they have off of the locked and gated football field? Probably not, right? It's probably easier to monetize a secured site than it is to charge users for the running track. And so we upped it to 25% of the total cost, but that could be out. It could be
The only, I appreciate that, sorry to interrupt, but the only number there that jumps out to me is the $80,000 in capital replacement. So we're expected the capital replacement cost is part of the operating monies?
That was the proposed structure that we discussed at our meeting, again, without unfortunately having the benefit of the business plan from the group. We did have to make some assumptions in the absence of that.
That certainly does help somewhat, because out of the 100 and whatever we said it was, $112,000, 80,000 of that is capital replacement. So genuinely, the only increase of the actual operating is more like $30,000. That makes way better sense for me. I think that in future that needs to be removed from the operating grant and laid out more closely tied to capital, because that's more accurate in my opinion. But that's a little better explanation for the overall amount. What are the dates on these 2 grants?
We're hoping that the ISIP grant application will be in shortly, and I believe that the decision on the ISIP grant is expected before the start of phase 1. The CFEP grant application deadline is in October, of 2019, and that grant will be decided probably in the spring of 2020.
Councillor Ruchar?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy.
Okay, there we go. So remind me, are we applying for these grants for anything else? And if we are, will that basically not jeopardize us, but reduce maybe how much we can get for this project?
Thank you, Councillor Hoekstra. No, the city is not applying for any other CFEP or ISIP grants that I'm aware of. And in fact, we're not applying for these ones. The association is applying for these ones.
So no, no, the city is not specifically applying, but we are definitely working with the Performing Arts Center to apply for these same programs. And no, there's no criteria that's like if you get one in your community, you're not going to get another, but I think there's a reasonable expectation that they will monitor how much money is going to each community and make some decisions accordingly.
So I realize we don't have the business plan in front of us. You said with expectations to monetize the track, and are we expected to believe that the track will generate funds or generate usage outside of the school system? Was that the general thought, or just the hope of the association? Because I'm assuming that the schools are relatively unlikely to be paying additional funds for the use of the track. Or is that an assumption I shouldn't be making?
I think that's probably a fair assumption, but unfortunately, we did just get it today, so we haven't reviewed it to know if there are user fees associated with the track. I don't recall that coming up specifically at the meeting. Do you?
Well, I would expect that, yeah, user fees at the park. I mean, there are user fees right now at the park for the existing amenities, and that there will be increased user fees when the amenities are improved. One would expect so. I don't know what they're anticipating as far as events or use of the track, but I do believe that the school will be using the track for free because we have the joint use agreement. I believe that applies to this park, yeah.
Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. The question is to CEO Gowdy. Is there any, and I was in earlier today and we chatted about this a little bit, but is there any indication that they may switch the phases, or has that been any consideration? They do the track first and then do the upgrades second, or is the track that they've chosen here, this is the path they want to proceed with this project?
So the phasing that they presented to us at our meeting with the county was that they would initially start with the expansion of the field house and some site improvements. The running track would be part of phase 2. Now, to date, the only drawings that we've ever looked at, you're seeing on the screen here, we haven't actually, without any sort of council endorsement, I guess, we haven't gone ahead with a full review of this. We haven't seen any phasing plan or anything of that nature yet. Barring maybe in the business plan, it will likely be there. I think you could certainly have that discussion about what you want to see at the phasing, or what council would support or not support.
Thank you for that. I just think it makes probably maybe a little more sense to do the track first, given that it's something we don't have, and then over time fundraise to make the changes to the field house. But I could be wrong. This is maybe the option that they've chosen. My only other comments about the whole project is that I guess the issue I have is that it's not being driven by the city per se. The mayor can probably recollect as I did that when this was first brought forth, this was brought forth by the, I guess primarily by the football community at that time, and they wanted this terrific field put in, and it was, yeah, wonderful. It did some significant fundraising, and then of course they then came to us and asked for a contribution. And I always felt then, like I do now a little bit, that we were being a little bit strong-armed, if you will. We're being almost guilt-tripped into contributing to this. I mean, it's a wonderful facility, don't get me wrong. But again, it's not really being driven by the city. You know, I just, you know, I remember distinctly last time where, you know, the conversation was along the lines of, well, the county's helping out, why can't you? And I know the county did a lot of work in kind last time. So it just gets me a little bit that, again, it's almost, I get the same sense here again, you know, that we're being asked, but it has a way of playing out in the public that, you know, oh, the city's, you know, not really, doesn't really want to get involved, you know, it's, you know, it just, I don't like the guilt trip. I didn't like it then, I don't like it now. So, that, you know, again, terrific facility. Can we come up with this money? I can think of a lot of things to do with, well, let's see here, 1.4 million or 200,000 or 600,000, so.
Thank you for that, Councillor Clonic. I do happen to agree with you. There's no question it is a terrific facility. We've got a lot of dedicated people that have worked hard in both in the building of it and the maintaining of it, and in fact the overall vision to continue with it. But it does make it difficult when we're expected to make priorities for our community to have a substantial amount of funds directed by an outside entity on their timetable and their request, and I have to agree with you in that regard. So, Councillor Gullickson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'd like to echo the fact that I also think this is a fabulous facility. I mean, looking at this, we're looking at something that they're not showing any fundraising in kind, and we know that that group is going to raise a fair amount of money, and I think you'll see a lot of the service clubs step up and put into this also. So I think the 1.4 certainly will be off the table, and it'll be one of the other figures, I believe. So to me, the biggest concern is the long-term maintenance of the facility and where we're going to be 10 years from now. And I think that's where the city does come in, more so than on the capital side of this original or the installation of it. Long-term maintenance is probably one of the biggest costs for arenas and all of these facilities compared to the capital side of it. And I think that's where the city, we need to be careful and make sure we're being prudent in that area. As far as on the capital side, I think their fundraising will kick in, and I think we'll be looking at a number, possibly the smallest number that's on that sheet. As far as the facility itself, I think for our community, what it's going to bring will be substantial as far as the events that will be hosted there. I've heard talk of, you know, the Alberta Games, those sorts of things would be able to come, which would be a big event for us and certainly a feather in our cap. And economically, it would be great for our community to host something like that. Track and field events throughout the year with high schools coming here and participating again. It's just a bonus for us. So I'm excited about the facility. I just want to make sure that our operating costs don't get out of control later on. As far as the capital side, I think their fundraising will cover off the majority of that.
You, Cody?
So the association themselves have provided the operating services in the past, and they have done a really good job. There's the very first year, I think, there was a learning process for the new field. But beyond that, they've contracted the services with a local, I believe, DB Bobcats. And when they've had reps come and look at the existing field, they've said, oh, it looks really good for how long it's been in service. They're doing a good job. So we would expect that same care would carry over to their maintenance of the running track.
Councillor Jacobson?
Sure, well, I guess everybody's weighing in. I understand where both yourself, Mayor, and Councillor Connor are coming from. I guess I perhaps don't have the baggage of a previous administration to carry with me. And I wonder if in no small part the quote-unquote strong arming is due to the fact that the individuals who run this association are, a lot of them operate in the private sector, in their private lives, and perhaps they're used to putting a sales pitch together. That being said, I'm not gonna lie to you, I will never use this facility when I'm to support my family, but I have a very difficult time not paying very close attention to a capital project of this nature that there's so much work that's gone into outside funding for it. And frankly, if everything that we considered capital-wise had started off with a 50% contribution from the private sector, and then we were working from there, we'd be in pretty good shape. So, I tend to agree with Councillor Gullickson. I don't think it's going to be 1.4. I don't think it's going to be 0. As far as the operating goes, it's so out of the realm of what I know that I think that's a concern. But regardless of their tactics, and regardless of perhaps the misinformation that's out there in the community about the city's stance behind this, again, like I said, I just have a very difficult time not taking seriously capital projects that have this much external funding to at least carry it forward to the point we have now and not see it through to whatever decision we're going to make. So the long and short of it is I'm behind this one.
All right, does anybody have anything else? Councillor Richard?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So I guess I appreciate what everybody's saying. I'm with Councillor Connick, but I'm also with Councillor Gullickson. So I want to go back to that operating grant. So remind me again, that's a $26,000 increase over the $50,000 we typically give them?
Yes, if memory serves, it's $50,000 right now, paid in installments through the year, and that's 26%, 26,000 more, yes, plus 7.
But that's annual, because I keep hearing multiple, okay.
Yeah, annual.
And that represents 25% of the overall cost of operating the park. Okay? Chief Cowdy, go ahead.
I think the city's $50,000 contribution is actually somewhere around 17% of their current total budget, which I think is somewhere around $250,000. So that's where I was cautioning to say the additional 26 really assumes that they can continue to find other sources for the majority of their budget. It could be that the city ends up for a little bit more, or a little bit less, possibly.
Okay, so to add to that, then my question was around the fundraising that they typically do every year. Is that for operational costs, or is that typically for capital?
To replace the reserve.
Maybe that's not a fair question because it's not ours. But
I think that it is a combination. They do have some capital reserves, but the majority of it, I believe, goes towards operations.
Director Duke?
I just want to comment a little bit further on that one, Councillor Hoekstra, that my understanding is that their revenues are from user fees and from donations that they generate through fundraising activities. And the only other funding they get is from the city and the county.
Thank you for that. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. To add to that, I think they carry forward reserves through their fundraising events to long-term plan for replacement of turf. I think there's reserves set aside for that already, if I understand their presentation from that for the past. But also, I echo both Councillor Jacobson's and Councillor Connick's, is that I think the past, you went into it far more blind as councillors with Councillor Connick and Mayor Creasy's past affiliation when they started, because there was no proven track record. Be a little bit different, I guess, in my opinion, that you went in with not knowing what the end result would be. I think we have some result of their organization, of their strength in their committee and their structure and their organization making that decision now. I guess and I echo that we're extremely fortunate to have that facility within our city. I'm just, maybe a question to CEO Gowdy is, why can't these organizations make their applications for these grants first, so that it is, in my opinion, a less difficult decision as a councillor to make, that we know where we stand financially, because like I say, it could be from what, 1.4 to 0. It's just and that's my kind of, even with the other groups that came forward, we've asked them to make the grant applications, and they come back 3 or 4 months and they haven't, and I just that's my beef with groups or organizations come forth. That principal support is, I know we at no way have committed financially, but we give this principal support, and I think sometimes that's perceived as we have city, yet we haven't, and I agree we have not committed a financial obligation, but I question the process. I think it could be, the decisions are simpler if you know the black and white numbers, and it's very gray, and that's
Chief Cody?
So just to be clear, we aren't asking for endorsement this evening, and we won't be bringing this back for endorsement of like up to 1.4 million. We'll be bringing it back once we hear back from the grants. So you will have that information, but given that you did give that in principle support at your meeting, we wanted to bring this information as soon as we had it, and we hope to have a bit more, but for you here, just so you have an idea of what's coming. They will be going forward with applications, and we will know those numbers before we ask for your final endorsement. However, if I go back to your Lacombe Performing Arts Center Foundation decision, that was the way you're describing, where actually an upset limit was given, somewhere around $54,000 a year, I think, prior to getting word back from the grant applications. So we've sort of learning from that, I guess. We wanted to get this ahead of you to you before that. So it's just for information and discussion tonight.
So with that in mind, I think it's important that we do take notice of the tax, or the potential tax impact. Under closer to the $250,000 mark, we're looking at a 0.4, and I see it as $666,000 at 0.59. So I think those numbers are possibly incorrect. We've got a nearly triple contribution, and it only adjusted the tax increase by 0.1, by less than 0.2%. That seems odd, and they're both rated at a 15-year amortization.
But there's the underlying, there's the addition of the insurance and the increase to the city operating that is coming up to a total increase. So the total increase associated with 0.4 is 56,000, and the total increase associated with the roughly 0.6 is 80,000 operating. So when you're looking at just the debt servicing, you're right that the numbers wouldn't add up, but when you add the insurance and the
insurance and the operating grants are identical on all the lines.
Right. So even if there was no debt servicing whatsoever, you'd be at 0.25%.
Okay. So how is it that our, okay, that makes it, now I'm catching on here, okay.
Or 4.2, that's clear, because that's if you look at the zero line.
Okay. I guess in light of that, I just think it's important that we do keep in mind the tax impact. I mean, last year we were looking at relatively low numbers I expect with our CPI, even at the lower end of this at 0.4%. It's a substantial amount because we've got costs that are well beyond our control. They're going to go up as well. So just something for us to keep in mind. I think it is fairly critical. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'd just like to speak to the endorsement given by council to these organizations and the reasons they need it. And in some cases, without it, they can't apply for the grants. They have to have our support before they even put in for these grants, because I know the ones that I've applied for over the years, it's critical to have city endorsement before you even make application. So for them not to know the numbers, that's just the way the whole system is, and we have to give them our support prior to them even making an application.
Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I just, Councillor Jacob does make a good point in that they have a significant contribution in hand, so kudos to them. And unlike some others on here, I don't have as much of an issue with the increase in operating as some have echoed. At the end of the day, fingers crossed they get a lot of money through grants, and the ask won't be much of us. That's all I can say at the end of the day.
You may have anything additional. Councillor Ross.
Sorry, Mayor Creasy, Kristen Seal Gowdy, which grant category is typically more than the other, did you say? Like CFIP or ISIP?
The Investing in Canada's infrastructure program has higher approval eligibilities, but I really, to Councillor Jacobson's question, and even here, I don't know which one will. Maybe it's approved for neither, maybe both, maybe the CFEP is more than the ISIP one, but I think it's unrealistic to expect that you will get either full amounts on both grants, and I think it's also unrealistic that you'll get zero on both grants. I don't think you would get zero on both. They are really well aligned with the scope of those granting programs, but between zero and full, I don't know.
Anyone else? If not, I would suggest that concludes our business for today. A short meeting for a change. We need anything else for that adjournment? So it is now 5:49 and we are adjourned.
Environmental